Madam Deputy Speaker. I am pleased to rise today to contribute to this important debate and to congratulate the Honourable Member for Rother Valley for putting this bill before us in the House. I want to commend him for shining a spotlight on an issue that affects some of the most vulnerable children in the country. Children who are not simply statistics or case numbers, but are young people who have experienced trauma, instability and in many cases loss. It is essential these children get the loving homes and support they deserve so they can flourish. The Honourable Gentleman has brought this issue to the House with compassion and care, and I commend him for doing so. As a serving Surrey County Councillor and a former member of the Corporate Parenting Board, this is an issue close to my heart too. I have seen firsthand many of the challenges and systemic failings which have been talked about today. As has already been set out, local authorities have a duty so far as reasonably practicable to ensure that looked after children are placed in accommodation that meets their needs within the local area. But many local authorities fail to achieve this, and often, shockingly, high numbers of children are placed out of area. The inclusion of the words "so far as reasonably practicable" were intended, I'm sure, to give some leadway to local authorities where needed, and to recognise that sometimes distance placements are in the best interest of the child in some situations. However, I'm afraid these words have in far too many cases become a licence for abject failure. Yes, I accept there are many challenges for local authorities in meeting their duties, like the higher cost of living making it difficult to recruit and retain foster carers, or increased national demand for placements, or even the recent ban on using unregulated accommodation for 16 and 17-year-olds. These pressures are very real, but it is unacceptable that we are seeing high numbers of looked-after children placed into accommodation far from the communities they know, far from their schools, their extended families and their support networks. Often these placements are made not because they are seen as the best option for the child in question, but there is simply nowhere else to put them. And the problem becomes this. It becomes almost normal to send high numbers of children out of area, so it becomes more acceptable. Well, I'm here to say today, except in very specific cases, it is not. Local authorities and national government need to be doing more to ensure that the sufficiency duty is met. The well-being and safety of these vulnerable children depend upon it. Coming back now to the bill we are considering today, Madam Deputy Speaker. The ambition to improve data transparency regarding placements of looked-after children is much welcomed. The bill places a duty on local authorities to publish such information, thus making it easier to identify those areas where there are issues and where local authorities aren't performing. We will only start to see tangible improvement when the extent of the issue nationally is clearly laid out. As often is the way, measurement prompts improvement. But undoubtedly, one of the most consequential aspects of this bill is the requirement for the Secretary of State to produce a national sufficiency strategy for looked after children. Local authorities can and should do more to collaborate at regional level to ensure children are placed in placements close to their homes. But the structural challenges faced likely cannot be solved by local government alone. National leadership is essential, and I would urge the front bench opposite to look seriously at how best to increase placement capacity where there are shortages, and how to ensure the right children end up in the right locations, not just the cheapest. This is not to say that local authorities themselves are not at the heart of this challenge. They are, but I know that they are finding it increasingly difficult, as I have mentioned earlier. The residential care market is now heavily dominated by private providers, and the cost of placements continues to rise, placing huge strain on local authority budgets. A shift to a more strategic approach is needed. At this point, Madam Deputy Speaker, I should acknowledge that for all the justifiable talk today against them, there are a very limited set of circumstances in which distance placements can be appropriate and necessary. Some children need specialist provision that simply does not exist locally. Others may need to be placed at a distance to ensure their safety if they have become involved with gangs or are threatened by an abuser. The question is not whether distance placements should be banned, they should not, but how we get to a point where they are used only when it is truly and demonstrably in the best interest of the child. It is also apparent that a key focus for addressing this issue should be to look at how we recruit, retain and support foster carers, and how we encourage local authorities to invest in local residential provision at a time of such pressure on their budgets. Many of the answers lie not only in legislation, but in funding, training and leadership, both locally and nationally. I look forward to the Minister's comments on these important issues. In closing, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will simply say this. When a child is taken into care, the state becomes their parent. That is not a responsibility to ever be exercised lightly. We must hold ourselves and the systems we put in place to the highest standard, the standard we would expect and demand for our own children. The Honourable Member for Rother Valley has brought this bill forward today in precisely that spirit, and I congratulate him once again for doing so, and it was truly a pleasure to speak on it.